I think the most important thing that I learned at school, if I look at my college days, was the idea that I was meant to have an opinion, and that opinion was meant to be based on some information or research. I was meant to conduct it. I remember vividly one lecture, one professor, not lecturer. I had probably the most uncomfortable meeting of my life was when I had this thing called a tutorial with him. And for whatever reason, I had not understood how college worked. And I turned up and I came with my notepad, ready to take notes, and I had an hour with the professor, and I didn't know that in many colleges you didn't get to sit down with the professor one-on-one. And so I was sitting down with the professor and was waiting to take notes, and he asked me, okay, so what are we going to talk about? And I was absolutely stunned. So if I could go back to school and do something again, I would like to do that first tutorial again, because it scarred me, because I had to sit there for the best part of the night while this man smoked a pipe, intermittently reading the Times newspaper and looking at me, making the point that I was an idiot. And I just felt completely and utterly out of my depth. And while I did later do some research, and I did later basically come up with some opinions, and I did understand that in college in Britain, it was about having opinions and having an understanding. I never quite got over that first tutorial with that man. He's probably gone now, but if I could relive part of my college, it would be to have turned up at that first tutorial with an opinion. Thank you.
If you were to go to school in a different country, what country would you choose and why? Linda.
Actually, if you could call someone else, because if the more I talk, the more I cough.
All right, that's what we'll do.
You can give Allie mine if you can give speakers a question.
You've already spoken. Lions, come on. I'm running out of people, right?
How about Matt?
You'll go, Wendy? Okay.
Well, wait, just sit here. No, what was it again, John?
If you were to go to school in a different country, what country would you choose and why?
Different country. I do believe I would not want to bother learning a language and going to another country. So it would have to be one that spoke English. Probably I'd go to Canada because then I could come home when I was fed up with it. It wouldn't be all that difficult, and I really, except for being in the Yukon Territory, I've been to Canada and so it's a place to explore. Also Canada, one of my home countries, is a rich in history. I would want to understand why they have the protest with French. They don't really get along. Also, living in Southern California, and I'm always having lived in Southern California, I would be going to a whole lot colder place. And sometimes I think it's too warm down here, but I think it was too cold up there. But then again, it would be interesting. Canada is even bigger than the United States in area, so it might be easy to travel around there. But I would go to Canada mainly because I don't want to deal with the language. Mr. Tabletop, it's faster.
May we have a timer's report?
Yes. Whoops. This one. Table topics. Joyce spoke for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Danny, our guest, spoke for 2 minutes and 3 seconds. Hank spoke for 1 minute 24 seconds. Lauren spoke for 2:33. Colin for 1:48. Wendy 1:25. Thank you.
Please vote for the best table topics presentation. And I return conduct of the meeting to our Toastmaster.
Thank you, everyone. And Scott, thank you very much for all the research thought behind the table topics. Thank you, and thank you all for sharing your ideas. Wendy, could I please call upon you as general evaluator?
I know that's what I was doing.
Do you need a couple more minutes? Or do you
No, I just don't want to mess now. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Wendy?
I left the agenda there, but I think I memorized it. Julie Downing way. Julie Downing made Alan's very interesting speech. Yes, company communicator, master maker.
Yeah.
Good evening, fellow Toastmasters, distinguished guests, especially Alan. Tonight, Alan's speech, Resistance is Futile, is both very relevant, especially to this club, but to Toastmasters in general. Now, why was it relevant to this club? Well, because in Anjou, we're a dinner club. We have to deal with many distractions as the meeting goes on, whether it's the wait staff or the food or witty banter going on at every table. That's a distracting thing. And how is it relevant to Toastmasters? Well, you were talking about accepting, assimilating into pathways. It's a great use of Star Trek, by the way. I think every one of us here knows Star Trek a little bit, even if we're not a fan. But the main purpose of your speech this evening was to practice the skills needed to address the audience challenges when you give a speech outside of Toastmasters. Now, to go through the real quick, easy stuff for every evaluation, you were within time, your vocal variety, your projection was great, you had good use of hand gestures, and it was a good speech. Now, to address the goal of your speech, you did something interesting. You had plants in the audience that would distract everyone and you, if you lost your cool, and just disrupted your speech, didn't pay attention, especially me, the evaluator. That's okay, that was a good tool, a good way to demonstrate what might play out in a situation outside of Toastmasters. And you dealt with it quite well. You let some conversation go on, you ignored it as best you could, and when someone yelled out to you, you did address them professionally, coolly, calmly. You didn't lose your cool. And when I think you had enough, and you told somebody, excuse me and Hank, you did so very calmly and respectfully, and that's the way you should have done it. What I would have done differently from you in this situation is maybe cut them off a little earlier. You did everything well, but maybe just don't let it drag on as long as it did. Especially when we're talking about pathways. That's something relevant that we all need to hear about. You had a great speech, it was relevant, and you met your goals. Great job. Thank you.
We had a real treat tonight, didn't we?
Yes.
Fellow Toastmasters and guests, and especially Deborah. We got to peek into her vision. She shared with us tonight a project about visionary communications. And the purpose of her project was to share with us the process that she's going through to develop her personal vision or that for an organization. She began with a metaphor of her daughter walking on the road. First of all, when you tell a story about a child, it touches each one of us. It gets into our heart. It gets into our attention span. We're listening to it carefully. So that was an excellent way to begin the meeting. It opened it up beautifully. I was really pleased to hear that you ended up with a vision statement. It was to live, to love, to uplift others. So a few suggestions should you decide to work on this next time or do give the speech again. We have to, in Toastmasters, always have suggestions, don't we, Deborah? So one of the things I would suggest would be the segue. You had a beautiful story about your daughter walking on the rope, and you shared a very nice quote about you don't need to be sighted to have vision. Somehow, then you jumped to live, to love, and to support others. So I would have enjoyed a little more description about your deep process. What's the process you're going through to develop your vision? I would like to really know and understand what are the questions you're asking yourself, what are the issues you're running into, how did you take your daughter's example and segue that into to live as part of my vision statement. And I saw how she was living. To love, because I love my daughter. There are certain ways to transition. So I felt like the two parts of the speech were disconnected a little bit. You might work on that. Regarding the gestures, the body language, you had excellent pauses, good hesitation, good use of vocal variety. One suggestion on gestures, you did a lot of two-handed gestures. You may consider the fact that gestures are only needed when there's a point to make. And then if it's a big point, make it a big gesture. And if it's a little point, make it a little gesture. But use your heart, use your mind. Make the gestures support the talk. For practice, give your whole speech without saying any words. Just do the gestures. In summary, you have a great speech. You gave us a good glimpse at your vision and the process you're going through to develop it. I was very touched by the stories that you offered. You can work a little bit on the gestures and the segue for smoothness in the speech, and that would bring it right up to the professional level which you're already performing at. Madam Evaluator.
Madam Chairman, may we have a report?
Yes, Matt spoke for 3 minutes and 5 seconds, and Wayne spoke for 3 minutes and 14 seconds.
Both when they time, please vote for who you think did the deputy delegation. And I'll give you just a minute to get your votes over to Warren, so he can count them. Okay, then now we're ready to go. All right, now for my paper report. I get to tell you what I thought of the meeting. The meeting started on time, thank you, Matt. And when we said we would break for dinner until a certain time, we started back exactly on time, which is what I like to see. There have been times that we forgot to watch the clock and had a big dinner. The presiding officer, who is brilliant and beautiful, started the meeting off by introducing all the people, and I don't know if sitting here is quite the right way to do it, but I have to work on this. Did anyone feel real uncomfortable, especially at your introduction?
It's the first time I've done it.
Oh, you were just uncomfortable with the introduction.
So I volunteered to do it again next
All
time.
right. Then we had Colin and his thing about meeting school days, and great questions and great responses to his questions to us about the school days. Colin did a good job of getting pre-meeting, of getting an email out telling us all what our jobs were, asking for responses, to the jobs, and obviously it's in their duty to educate here, right? But you put them in Concord, and if anybody isn't familiar with Harry Potter, that's too good. That was great. I've read all 7 books and all the movies. Fantastic. The speeches were both very different and both really good. I have seen at that speech Ellen did before, and it was a very small club when I was an area director, and I got to be the one that wouldn't shut up. Don't think I didn't have fun with that. I was just so mad that Ellen didn't give me a role to do. I actually think he could have got more disruption. I think you people were too nice to him. You should have disrupted him even more. But Matt, it's right that it was up to you to stop the person who did it when I was there actually got mad. Yeah, Brian, your speech was beautifully done. Both evaluators did an excellent job in evaluating the speech. Matt, I was particularly proud of you because that is a kind of speech you were evaluated before, and you haven't done a lot of evaluations, and I think you did quite well with it. And your suggestions were, not that I necessarily agree with them, because I thought the people should have been more aggressive, but I understand where you were coming from with them. All in all, we have had a good meeting. Scott, good table topics, getting us all to think about our wonderful school days. And I've noticed math and science came up as the classes people did not like the most. I just don't understand why. I didn't ask me about algebra 2 grade. That would have been right there with the other ones. I didn't think I'd live through that class. So we've had a good meeting. We still have to look forward to a great keynote speaker. And at this point, I will return conduct to our first time doing very well this Mr. Alan Walsh.
It's now my privilege to introduce our keynote speakers this evening, Gary Ertfast. Try that again, Fritz, forgive me, Gary. Gary has been a chiropractor for 52 years and an alternative allergist for 20 years. I'm going to read this because there's some big words in this. He was mentored by Dr. Dalai Nabutrapad.
Took me 6 months to learn how to say that.
Okay. And he was and he basically has a PhD from the Nabutrapad allergy elimination technique and has served as an instructor in Europe for this technique. In addition, has had 15 to 20 years as a master of ceremonies for the annual Nabutrapad allergy elimination symposium. Doctors and other healthcare practitioners from more than 40 countries around the globe gather to update their skills. He has also lectured numerous times at the symposium, and the latest being last year on the subject of histamine, which is actually the subject of his speech tonight. Gary, please join us, and we're looking forward